All right, hi everyone. Welcome to this session about MariaDB Enterprise Server. My name is Max Metter. I'll be doing this. I'm the product manager or in charge of product management for Enterprise Server. Yesterday in the keynote, Michael mentioned that he had these waves of disruption. And the first wave of disruption that Michael mentioned was Enterprise Server, or when we added the Oracle compatibility mode in Enterprise Server. So Enterprise Server really is the kind of the bread and butter of obviously for MariaDB. But also as we go forward, as you've seen yesterday in Michael's talk, we've added lots of different things, including different languages like Postgres. Enterprise Server is still kind of a key component in everything we do going forward. So in this talk, I'll talk a bit about how Enterprise Server fits in, how the server fits in, how Enterprise Server fits in, and then a few words about what's coming next for Enterprise Server. And I'll try to leave time for questions at the end. All right. So I'll start with kind of this mission statement we had. We build a database for all, any workload, any cloud, any scale. And I think this was further enhanced yesterday in Michael's keynote, where we saw, Jag showed that we're adding a Spark connector. So we're adding lots of different types of things. We have the ability to do multi-cloud. We're adding Postgres combined with Expand. So we're doing a lot of different things. But still, Enterprise Server is kind of key in many of these different types of workloads that we can do. If you look at, obviously, where can you run Enterprise Server? You can do it on-prem. You can do it in the cloud. And you can connect through a proxy or through MaxScale, which is our proxy. And if you look at these different types of workloads that we can support, we have the standard OLTP that's obviously through the server. We have analytical through Column Store, which is still through the server. You can do hybrid, where you combine OLTP with analytical. You can do it in the server through combining InnoDB and Column Store. We have distributed SQL with Expand, and as announced yesterday, we're now combining Expand with both Postgres and also with MariaDB Server, which is something that we haven't really released yet, but we are releasing it. What did Kurt say, in 2 weeks? Or something like that. So in 2 weeks, the first version of this will be available on SkySQL. But as you can see, Enterprise Server is still a part in a lot of these different types of workloads. So now I'm going to talk a bit more. So what is Enterprise Server? And what about the enterprise part? What is Enterprise Server compared to just MariaDB Server? So Enterprise Server is a program we launched in 2019. Before that, there was only MariaDB Server, which we now called MariaDB Community Server. The purpose with launching this was that we realized that a lot of our customers had very different demands from the typical community user. They were doing different things on different scales. Yesterday we mentioned, or Michael mentioned, ServiceNow, which is one of our large customers. They're running 200,000 servers, MariaDB servers, right? So it's different than a typical community user. No one else has 200,000 servers. So we decided that we needed to have an enterprise approach geared towards enterprise customers, where we focused on having a predictable schedule. We focused on stability, robustness. And we had some key feature development that we did together with customers, where we said, OK, what are the problems that the customers are facing where we need some special development? And that was kind of the start of the enterprise program, the birth of Enterprise Server. Then, once we launched this in 2019, then we looked, all right, well, now we have defined what we want Enterprise Server to be. What about community server? And that's something we launched last year. We said, all right, well, we know what we want enterprise to be. Now let's look at what do we want community to be. And we said, well, what's the purpose of having a community server? And we came up with, well, one of the key things with having a community server, besides obviously having a large community of users, is to be able to get things out faster, get innovations out, get them to users, get them tested, and then based on the feedback we get, we can then kind of create enterprise server as this robust feature, well, this robust and predictable schedule and all that stuff that we have in enterprise. So community server is kind of our innovation version of MariaDB, so to speak. So we decided to let's start releasing community server more often. So now we have a new release series of community server out every quarter. So any day now, 11.0 community server will be GA. 3 months ago, 10.11 was GA. 3 months before that, 10.10 was GA, and so forth. So you have a really rapid pace. This allows us to get features out quickly. We have for community server, really follow a train model. We have these dates where, okay, by this time, a new feature has to be given to testing. Then we have a testing cycle, and if the QA says, yes, this is good enough, it goes into community server. If they say no, there's still open bugs, it goes back and gets on the next train 3 months later. So community server is our way to get features out quickly. And then instead for enterprise server, we said, let's slow down the cycle. We used to have a new release series every year. We said, let's slow down the cycle. Let's have it less often, but instead maintain this for longer. This was, again, based on feedback from our customers. And we did look at what other companies were doing, and in particular at Red Hat. So this is kind of trying to do something similar that Red Hat is doing with Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Fedora. They have a very similar model, not the same timings and not the same cycles, but the purpose of the two is very similar. And another thing we added to enterprise server is backports. So typically what we had done in the past is when we have a new release series, it goes out, it's GA, it never gets more features after that. It gets bug fixes, but no more features. However, we noticed that for customers, they often needed some particular feature. However, upgrading to a new release series is a huge task, a huge burden. They have to go through all kinds of stuff. So we looked at, well, are there cases where we can take a feature that doesn't impact anything that you're using if you're not explicitly using the feature? So basically a feature that's non-intrusive unless you explicitly choose to use it. And that's what we're doing with backports. So in some cases, we have features that go into a new version of community server. We have customers who would like to use this, but they don't want to wait for the next enterprise or something. We actually backport this feature to a maintenance release of enterprise server. We have these rules provided that it doesn't impact anything unless you're explicitly using that feature and things like that. So typical things would be plugins where you actually have to load in the plugin, otherwise it's not even there. So those are easy to backport, but there are other things like that as well. So that's something that enterprise has over community. So if you look at other differences, this is basically it. We do different. We have different QA. We have other defaults and so forth. But the whole release cycle is already the big difference between enterprise and community. That they have such different cycles. There are some features that are enterprise only that we develop with customers. Like there's an enterprise audit plugin. There's an enterprise backup and so forth. So some extra things that are available in enterprise only. Then if you look at the life cycle, here we can see the timeline of enterprise servers. So does this thing have a pointer?
Yeah, it's under the tape.
Oh. oops, no, I don't. Okay, I'm not going to use the pointer. So if you look here, 10.3 was before we launched Enterprise. There we just had 5-year of maintenance. Then we launched Enterprise, and then end of life date. It's not what's going to be in. This is some of the things we have been working on. So many of these things will be in, but maybe not all of them, right? So this is speculative, this list. But some of these things are already out in community server versions. Some of these are not out in anything yet. So here's a long list. I'm, again, not going to go through all of them here, but you can look at the list. When we release Enterprise Server 23, we will obviously have more extensive white papers and demos and things about all these cool features. And of course, we want you guys to, when we have the tech preview out, to try Enterprise Server, give us feedback, and then we make it better for GA. I personally like the partitioning improvements a lot, especially when we're like these hybrid use cases where you want to combine, like, say, column store with InnoDB, or now even expand and have some local tables. You can do some really cool stuff with these partitioning features. But I'm going to show a few others that we're working on. So we have done a lot of work on JSON enhancements lately. Here's a list well, a long list of all of the JSON enhancements we've done or will be added to 23. Some of these are already out, and some will be new in 23. But my particular favorite, besides what I already mentioned, are the schema change features. One feature that will hopefully be out in Enterprise 23 is what we call optimistic alter table for replicas. So who here uses replication in some form? Okay, most of you, right? So replication is great for many things, but it also has issues. So first of all, it's obviously completely asynchronous, which is good and bad. It means that on the master side, you don't have to wait for anything to get replicated, but it also means that there's inherent lag. You can't get away from the lag. Now, typically lag is not that long. It's microseconds or something, but there are some statements that create lag because they take such a long time to implement, and one of those is alter table. So alter table can take a really long time. If you're the larger your table, the longer it takes. It can take minutes, it can take hours, it can take days. And this is especially problematic in replication because what happens if you start your alter table on your master, let's say it takes 2 hours. It takes 2 hours. Then it's done, you're good. Then it gets replicated, and then it starts on your replica. And then it's another 2 hours. So by having this alter table, you basically create replication lag because you have to do it twice, and there's no way around it. Or is there? So the new feature we have is called optimistic alter table, where basically when you start your alter table on your master, replicate that, and the replicas, they will also start the alter table. Then when you're finished on the master, you send this command, hey, we're done. You can commit on the replicas as well. So the lag of the alter table is minimal. There's basically no added lag. You don't have to wait 2 times for the alter table to finish. And in case the alter table fails on the master, we will of course not send a commit, but we will also abort on the replicas. So you don't get weird inconsistencies either. So this is a really simple feature actually, but also really cool and helps a lot of use cases. So this is one of my personal favorites. But we're also working on another feature related to this, to alter table, called online, schema change or alter table. So the problem typically with alter table is not only does it take long, your table is locked while you're doing it. So you cannot do anything with that table. Now, InnoDB has some cool features like instant alter table, Some things can be done online, but not everything and not always. So the feature we're working on right now is, well, Sergey, who's in the room, is actually one of the guys working on it, is an online alter table where we actually don't lock the whole table. Instead, we have a small lock at the beginning. We start doing the changes. We start doing the alter table. We capture all of the changes that happen to the table while the alter table is going on. But you can do DML on the table. And then once the alter table is done, then you apply the changes to the new table. So it's locked again for a short period of time. And then you're done. So obviously, the benefit of this, well, the larger your table, the more you benefit, because the locking time is related to the size of your table. So you actually can gain hours of online activity with your table. So that's a really cool feature as well. And that's pretty much all I was going to go into with this deck. So do we have now questions? Do you want to? Sorry, we have to use the microphone for the questions.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Anyone in the room with a question? All right. Here we go.
So for the online alter, are you able? So you're able to access the table while the structure changes is happening,
Right.
and so that change buffer is basically changes are going to the new table and being captured to go to the table with the new structure, to keep everything in sync. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about bitemporality early on, but I didn't see that on the slides. What is it you doing there?
I can. So that's features we added in 10.3 and 10.4. So we in 10.3 we added system versioning. So basically, which is basically a way of basically instead of well, it's a way of keeping track of the history of everything that happens to a table. So you do something you turn on a table by table level. So you say that you want, for this table, you want to keep system versioning. So what happens is that every time you do any DML that changes data, it will actually well, it will change the data, but it will keep track of the old version of the row. So you basically keep this, well, if you choose to have it for infinity, you keep this infinite history of things that changed in your table. So you can then query your table, say, well, how did this row look 2 years ago, 7 years ago, or show me the whole table, and you give a date frame. You say, I want to see the table 10 years ago, or I want to look at the change history of this row. So basically, you keep track of all changes to the table. The way we do it is that we kind of we add a timestamp to all rows, and then when we do an update, you basically add a new row with a new timestamp, and you have the old row goes to the history part of the table. And same if you do a delete, you basically just it goes to the history part of the table and so forth.
Can you share that slide here?
I can.
I have a question regarding.
Wait. Yeah, but I'm not done. So that's the system version. Then there's also application time periods, which is what makes it bitemporal, where you can define periods inside your table. So that's more application level. So that's so for example, if you're selling something like support contracts, you can, for example, say that okay, the periods cannot overlap, so you cannot have overlap. So you define a beginning and an end of a contract. Then you cannot create another contract for the same customer that overlaps and things like that. So you basically have these application type time periods.
What's combined by temporal?
Oh, combined just means that you can have the same in the same table. You can have both system versioning and application time periods in the same table.
So I have a question regarding.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding the application. So let's say that I have an application that it pushes a lot of updates to the backend. many of those updates are meaningless because they didn't change anything. They just pushed an update because it went through their process and it just pushed an update. But the record didn't change. In those instances, does the session basically look at the update and say, nothing has been changed, I'm not going to do this? Or it just add another record to the queue because it was sent an update?
I don't know. Sergey?
I think over the history we did both ways, but from what I remember, standard requirements is to add a new record even if you didn't change anything. So we add a new record.
So it keeps the new record even
Yeah.
if you didn't change it?
Yeah. So the standard doesn't operate in concept. The old values are equal to the new values, thus we are not considering update. Standard doesn't do that. It says it was an update, you have to. The version has
Even if
changed.
it doesn't change anything. And I mean, I guess for system versioning, that's especially important because then you get a new timestamp for the row, even if the values are exactly the same. Yeah, even if the values is the same, but you get a new history like entry in your
So
table.
if you wanted to avoid that, what would be the best way to say, tell me if the row to row?
Well, you would have to have some where clause where you compare it to the
Yeah,
old.
you have a table with 500 fields.
Yeah, you would
Can't
have to
do- you
create
can't do that.
some procedure that does it, that compares them row by row.
There was a question from the online audience about the ability to skip versions of updates. So to go from, say, 10.4 to 10.6. Is that possible?
It is technically possible, but we typically don't recommend it because there's just more change. But I think the real issue is more like when you do upgrades from multiple versions, there's like also performance characteristics and things like that change, and those the more versions you go, the more you have changes like that might then affect your application, even though the application just works. Manjot, you had a
Yeah, I think when our professional services work with customers on this, like, have we done like a 5.2 to 10.3 or 5.2 to 10.5 upgrade? Yes, we have. Would we ever recommend that? No, right? It depends on your workload. It depends on your data. There's just so many factors in play. And there's also ranges, right? Like 10.1 to 10.3, I would say upgrades in there are okay. 10.4 to 10.6, you're okay. But like going from 10.3 to 10.6, you may want to do each version. And that's very dependent on what you're doing with the database.
Great, thank you.
One generic question about, I noticed that there was a spider in there. So what's the strategy with Spider moving forward?
Yeah, so Spider, for those who don't know, Spider is a storage engine that, so we support Spider, it's one of the engines, and we have focused Spider on like the purpose of Spider is remote connectivity. So you can basically, you create like, it's a bit like a database link that you have in Oracle or other databases where you basically create a fake table and it's actually a connection to another data system and another table there. So that's what Spider is used for. And we've added support for the ODBC protocol so that it doesn't have to be a MariaDB server, it could be anything that supports ODBC. And so that's basically what we're doing with Spider.
And for customers who are looking to migrate from enterprise to cloud or go hybrid, can you talk a little bit about that migration path?
Yeah, there was actually a session about it earlier, or there is still today. But I think that's a good way to migrate. Is actually you can if you're not sure about an update or a migration, you can basically launch something in the cloud and test it out. A new version in the cloud, you can replicate to the cloud. SkySQL even supports monitoring that whole thing, so you can replicate your data to the cloud. So you can launch a new version, for example, in SkySQL, but it doesn't have to be SkySQL. But you can launch a new version in SkySQL, replicate everything there, then you can test it out, and then if it works, then you move it to on-prem or something similar. So that's, I think the cloud is actually an easier way to do things, well, to test changes like this, if you're able to do that.
Are there any plans to support error log and/or slow query log format in JSON?
Not that I'm aware of. This is the first time I hear that request, but yeah.
Okay. And is there a way to understand, like in a compatibility matrix or something that can help understand the impact of skipping versions during upgrades?
Manjot, do you have a good suggestion for that? But I can tell you one thing though.
Consulting.
Yeah. One thing I can tell though is which I'm actually surprised no one has asked, is so with Enterprise now we're starting to use different version, and next Enterprise is going to be 23, and we're going to use the like Ubuntu style. We're going to use the year and the month. The compatibility between Enterprise and the community server is going to be a bit muddier, right? There's no longer going to be Community 10.6, Enterprise 10.6. There's going to be lots of community versions, and there's going to be Enterprise 23. So well, none of you asked the question, but my answer is we are going to maintain a kind of a compatibility matrix, because some of the features, so let's say we have Enterprise Server 23, it's compatible with everything up to, say, 11.1 in community server. It will also be compatible with some things in future versions of community servers, because we already have the backports. So we are going to maintain like a compatibility matrix between enterprise and community for these reasons.
Excellent. Last question from the audience.
So I have a question about your JSON support. So how extensive is this JSON inclusion going to be in the new versions coming? I'll give you an example of what my requirement is, and maybe you can give your answer based on that. I have a requirement where I have to ingest a large number of JSON files and change them into a third normal form.
Right.
So based on that.
Yeah, I mean, were they forward or backwards? So I mean, we have a lot of functions to treat JSON, right? So when you want to modify it from JSON into the third normal form, of course you're going to have to do different operations with the data in JSON, right? So we do have an extensive library of functions for that. I think and this is something we've been kind of iteratively adding. Every version does a few more JSON functions, right? And so our goal is to be able to treat all use cases you would have with JSON. I mean, JSON is, in a sense, it's just a different format for the data. We want you to be able to, whatever you need to do with JSON, you can do it in MariaDB. So that's our goal. If there's something you cannot do, we want to know so we can make sure that we fix that. Like, yeah. So I think that's my answer. We really want to be able to support everything you might want to do with JSON. And these are, and I mentioned backports, and this would be a typical case where a backport is an easy solution. Let's say there's something missing. We need to add another JSON function. We put it in next version of community server, and you're running Enterprise 23. Well, once that's out and it's QA'd and it works, we're going to backport it to 23, so you don't have to upgrade. You will get that, because that's the thing unless you use that function, you will never see that functionality, right? So we would backport it, and you will have it in 23. I think we're out of time. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the questions.